grain of rice, a grain of rice is going to tip the scale. Just remember that, lads.
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen between them, and now they're really roaring. And I can tell you, that there won't be a cow milk from County Clare for at least a week.
Kerry's dark night of the soul is over. For almost every other county, a gap of 8 years before All-Ireland would be a cause for jubilation. For Kerry, it was a crisis, and one made much worse by the glories of Dublin. Beating Galway to win the All-Ireland last Sunday is an end in itself, of course, but it also seems set to be the beginning of something else. We're going to look at the past, at the present, and at the future, and we're going to ask why Kerry won the All-Ireland this year. Hello, everyone. You're very welcome to the Irish Examiner Gaelic Football Show in association with Renault. My name is Paul Rouse, and I'm joined by the former Armagh footballer Oisín McConville, and by two men deep in the throes of celebration, the former Kerry footballer Bryan Sheehan and the sports editor of the Irish Examiner, Tony Leen. Oisín, there are no more questions to be asked of Kerry. They are All-Ireland champions. They have answered successfully every question that you posed of them.
They have, Paul, and I have to take my hat off to them. What a year they've had. You consider how they dominated the league and then come in the championship and just kept, as you say, just kept answering questions, things that were put up to them. Sitting back last night after the game, I'll talk about the game in a second, but sitting back last night after the game, thinking of the pressure that those lads were under, that was heaped on them from all directions. And let's face it, Paul, if we're going to be honest about it, from their own people, more so than anybody else. Because on several occasions, I have got very, very excited as I get nowadays, about Kerry, where they're going, some of the performances, and it's always been tempered by running into some boys like Brian and Ian Fitzmaurice or Gooch or some of them, Tomas, and I'm saying, well, hold on a second. We're going in the right direction, but we still haven't done what was set out to do. And I talked about that the day after that unbelievable day they had against Tyrone in the league last year. And I don't want to keep harping back to that, but people were bringing me back down to earth about Kerry's performance, not the other way around. So this team had to deliver. It had to deliver, and it had to deliver in spades. And the only way that this team could define themselves was to win an All-Ireland. And look at the way they've gone about it. They've had to go into the trenches. And at the start of the year, that's the question mark I will put against them, is that if it's tight, if it's tough, if it's uncompromising, if it's not going the way you want it to go, if it's not going to the script, if it's not free-flowing football, how are you going to eke out a result? And do you know what? That was the great thing about the way that they ended up winning All-Ireland against Dublin and then against again yesterday. Now, yesterday...
Did you think Kerry were good yesterday?
I thought Kerry failed in an area yesterday that I would never have seen them fail, and that was in the final third of the pitch. I thought that they weren't as good in the final third as I would have expected them to be. Probably not as ruthless. But again, I actually think that adds to the achievement. And the reason why I think it adds to the achievement is because, again, things aren't going the way you want them to go. You have to think, even the substitutions at halftime, they were substitutions that needed to happen. I would argue that in times gone by, you give Paul Geaney 10 minutes and say, listen, Paul, can you turn this around? Do you know what I mean? But he wasn't even given that 10 minutes. And that was crucial because I thought Killian Spillane had a serious effect on the game when he came on. I think that it wasn't a perfect performance, but it was exactly what they needed to do in order to win All-Ireland. And in many respects, a win to win that way will stand to them better down the lane than shooting the lights out. And
I want to ask Brian about that point. I'll come back to you on the match in a second, but I want to ask Brian about the point. I think you've got to a really pivotal moment in the match yesterday, which is when the teams were going in off the field at half time. And I want to ask you, Bryan, would you have done, what was in your head to do at that point? Was it in your head that David Moran and Paul Ganey had to be lifted? Is that what you would have done?
Paul Ganey probably was of concern because I think the chances that he did miss are his bread and butter stuff that he usually converts in his sleep. He was still trying hard, so it's very hard to turn around and say that, it was one of those days that things weren't falling for him. I think the 2 chances he had in the first half that he put wide were scores that you would expect him to convert. And I think because that he'd missed them, and because you have someone like Killian Spillane who is, let's face it, he is lethal in front of the goal. And when you get ball into Killian's hand, he's a finisher, whereas Paul's probably more of a ball winner. Well, a better ball winner than Killian. So it's probably a case of which do we do here? Do we sacrifice a ball winner, or do we go with someone who's clinical, like Killian, because he does not miss when he's inside in that scoring area. So that was possibly one. The David Moran one, I didn't see it that much, but again, look, I didn't get a chance to watch the game back, so it's kind of hard to do it. But I think that's where there's great credit due to Jack. I think that's one of his big strengths, and I would probably say if some of the Kerry management gone by, I don't think they probably would have made that call, if I'm being honest. But I would think that's where Jack. We spoke about being ruthless. Is it being ruthless, or I just think he's this ability in games to see things happening in games and acting there and then. It's not a case of going back home, watch it, and then realizing, okay, we should have made that change. Or he can just see things in the middle of the game and react them. And 9 times out of 10, he gets it right. Look, the one with David, I just found it hard to see. Look, things probably weren't going particularly well for him. From the point of view of the small things, he slipped in front of the tackling, was a Shane Walsh, and there was a soft free in the 30-yard line. He caught a great ball in front of the Cusick stand, dropped it out of his hands. Look, things like that, but that happens, It wasn't as if Dave was going bad. I think it was just more, I think they needed a reaction. I think they had to be seen to do something, because
there was a line, Bryan, that David Moran said yesterday evening. He was asked about Jack, and he talked about Jack at half time seems to have got stuck into them as well. And that's knowing when to do that. It's one thing being ruthless, and it's one thing losing the head, but doing it to a purpose is the key.
It is, and usually Jack is calm in dressing rooms. Jack isn't the fella to go hooing around the place. He's usually very calm, but I just think it was one of those days yesterday where, as Oisín said, Kerry, the final third, like kicking 6 wides in the first half alone, and there were 6 wides that were poor wides. Do you know what I mean? And that's where I was getting concerned, because I was thinking to myself, right, after kicking. I was kind of happy at half time going in where we were going in, having played poorly, having kicked 6 wides, and you're only a point down at half time. I take it, but sometimes like that, and I even go back to a game we played Clare in 2014, I think, back in Ennis, and like that, usually Eamon would be a quiet character, but he let rip at halftime. I had never seen Eamon now to get, and he called out fellas, called fellas out and said, what's going on here, and sometimes you need it, and I think sometimes fellas do need that bit of a wake up call. It's no point just patting fellas in the back or trying to lead them on. Sometimes you do need that kick in the backside to get you going. He gave fellas 10 minutes, and I've no doubt Jack did something very similar as well yesterday. He whipped a few fellas, and I think that could have put the fire under a few other fellas who weren't performing as well. Do you know what I mean? So it was a great call. But look, as I say, for the 2 individuals, possibly Paul, you could just see the things weren't on the day from Mark clicking, and the David one. Look, it just could have been a number of things. You know what I mean? I think Jack did reference that he was unwell. So look, you just don't know how much that affected him too, from the point of view of not getting stuff into the legs, and that would knock it out of you too. Do you know what I mean? So, but again, it just seems to be Jack just seems to get it right on the day with those big calls.
And another thing, Bryan, when you think about it, and I know you don't get too caught up in the club thing here, but just to show the fact that, nobody's know nothing. Paul Ganey's club is the same club as the selector Diarmuid Murphy, and they're very close friends. David Moran's club is the same club as the selector Mike Quirk, and they're nearly best friends.
Yeah.
So, and they'd have had an input into that as well. And I remember when Kerry jogged out Paul onto the pitch for the second half, straight away, like Jack got everybody's mind working. You saw the two Spillans coming out onto the field and you're thinking, wow, geez, changes here. And you're looking around. And I think Brian's right. I thought to myself, well, Killian is coming on for Paul Gainey. Definitely. Did I see the David Moran one? I didn't at that stage, to be honest with you. I was looking around. I thought it might have been Dermot O'Connor was coming off. I thought it might have been even Stephen O'Brien, but I was saying it couldn't be Stephen O'Brien because he'd had such a good first half. They're the big calls. They're the percentage differences that separate Jack O'Connor from the rest of us.
What's his defining characteristic, Tony? What is Jack O'Connor's defining characteristic?
I remember speaking to a nameless county board official around the time of Jack being ratified as the manager for this year, and you all remember, and Brian will remember better than most, like there was an awful sense in Kerry that they were washing their dirty linen in public. There was an awful lot of bloodletting. Peter Keane was having his say. Everybody seemed to be having a say about who should this and who should that. The interviews with Stephen Stack's group, the interview with Peter Keane, the interview with Jack O'Connor were all very different. But I got this sense from talking to people that Jack O'Connor went into a room, said he was bringing Paddy Talley in, and if they didn't like that, he wasn't interested in the job. I would think he decided, this is what I need. And the county board officer said to me a couple of months ago, but many months certainly after this had all died down, if Jack O'Connor needed to do a deal with Lucifer, he would do it if it was for the betterment of Kerry football. He would go to wherever he needed to go to give Kerry the extra couple of percent. And bringing him in, not just with his previous track record, but the one thing, Paul, you get in any aspect of life, whether it's professional life, whether it's sports management, whatever, the thing you get with experience is judgment. You get really good judgment in the big moments. You get to make the really big calls, and most of the time you get them right. People will say and have said anything they want about Jack O'Connor. The bottom line is that over the course of this year, if there was 15 big calls over the course, I would say he must have nearly got the 15 of them right. And you can't gainsay that. Any of you can't actually say, well, he did this and he did that. The bottom line is right up to halftime yesterday, he got the big calls right. I'm actually being unfair when I say he got the big calls right, because I know Paddy, Mike and Dermot Murphy would have a big say in that. But as I said, just going back to the point, you got to remember, David Moran is from Strand Road, Paul Gainey's from Dingle. There would have been very close friends of theirs in that enclave at halftime, but I would imagine there wasn't a moment's hesitation. It was get them out, get the guys in. This is all about getting over the line today.
If Oisín, we've spoken about Jack O'Connor there and his impact. I will say that if you look at a reason for Kerry winning that match, obviously Jack O'Connor's decisions, but David Clifford would not be a bad place to start explaining Kerry's success in this year's All-Ireland Championship.
Yeah, look, what do you say about David Clifford at this stage?
At 23 years of age. 23
years of age. First of all, if we go into reverse, and I was on record as saying I felt when Kerry moved in the way that they moved in order to get Jack O'Connor in, I felt at the time it was blind panic. That's the way I felt about it at the time, because I felt it was just like, let's go back to, Back to the Future. And I wasn't 100% sure if that was going to work. And then, as Tony makes the point, you see the backroom team that he's putting in around him, and you think, yeah, okay, this is a guy who's really moving with the times. As far as David Clifford is concerned, I can't explain to you, Paul, the pressure that was on his shoulders. There was pressure on Kerry, but there was a huge amount of pressure. He was carrying a lot of that pressure. And to perform on a consistent basis whenever the pressure is at its highest is how you judge a footballer. You don't judge a footballer by kicking, 10 points when your team's 10 up. It's when the games are there for the taking. The games are there, in the melting pot. The games are there, for somebody to grab it by the scruff of the neck. Like yesterday for 62 minutes was unreal. It was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable game of football. And I don't think we probably truly appreciated what was going on in front of us until we sit down and watch it again. How the execution of the skills, were so good in order to make those two defenses at times look pretty average. There was 12 minutes in the second half where it was just we attack and we will score, and the other team attacks and they will score. I fucking loved it. I loved all of those 12 minutes because
Yeah, I did too. I really, really enjoyed that match on Sunday. Really enjoyed it.
And I think put myself on the sideline in the Kerry bench or the Galway bench, and I'm thinking, but we've practiced to keep control of the game. We've practiced that, we're going to control all of these things during the game. All the set plays, we're going to control our kickouts, we're going to control the opposition when they come into our half, and all of a sudden there was zero control. And that's when you look on the sideline, you look on and you think, I hadn't really planned for this. This thing is now developing into a shootout. And Galway were very much up for the shootout. Very much up for it. And if I take this game in reverse, for the last 12, 13 minutes of the game, really and truly, Kerry were just getting stronger. The bench was really having an impact. Galway's bench weren't having that impact. The one substitution which from a Galway point of view was the Rob Finnerty one. I just thought he still seemed to have plenty left. I know he wasn't having a brilliant game, but I don't think that Galway are in the same position just yet as where Kerry are, as in they can replace a Paul Geaney for a Killian Spillane, to bring a Killian Spillane in. Like, I think they brought in Finian O'Leary, who can fulfill the role of a Heaney or a Kelly, and will get up and he will walk. But he's not he's not the scoring threat that Finnerty is. And I'm not sure if Galway could have afforded that substitution at that time. They needed all of the ammo on the field that they could possibly have, whether they were slightly malfunctioning or not. So I thought that was a big call. But getting back to the David Clifford thing, when the pressure is at its highest, that's when you're able to define a player, and he just keeps delivering and delivering and delivering. And he looks as if, honestly, this is the way I feel about him. He looks like a guy to me that as the pressure ramps up, he gets cooler. Everybody else is getting to a point where, they want to do something absolutely outrageous, and he does something outrageous, but he does it on the dead of his leisure. And like the things he was doing yesterday in Croke Park, and you have to give Shane Walsh a shout out yesterday, but the things he was doing in Croke Park yesterday are not easy done. They're not easy done, and you're coming up against, when you look at the physique of the Galway defence and even even the midfield, a half-forward line, you look at the bodies that were getting in behind the ball, and yet he was still able to, off two steps, kick points left and right. He keeps you guessing all the time. You don't know where he's going. He has been a player, Paul, that was so direct. When he first come into, like, he wanted a goal every time he got on the ball. And you know what? I think that in long term has definitely helped him, because people are still thinking this guy is gonna dip the shoulder and he's gonna go past me. And so what do? You take two steps off him, and he doesn't. That's all he needs. He just needs a half step, kick it over the bar. So the way that he delivered, and last night I just thought he encapsulates everything that was going on as far as Kerry were concerned, and the question marks and all of those things. And I don't think necessarily the question marks were around him, but they're around his team. And he seemed to take that very, very personal. And he was getting them over the line regardless yesterday. I thought, a phenomenal performance in the most trying of circumstances.
But I think that's when you talk about great players and good players, or the best players in the country, or the best players that play Gaelic football, they do it on the big day when it matters. And like we talk about, I kind of see Davis from the point of view of the bigger the occasion, the better he'll play. I think you put him into a Super Bowl attendance with a couple of million people watching all around the world, and he'll just get better and better. I think it's like he goes to Croke Park because this is my arena and now I'm going to put on a show for you. I think that's the way he goes at it. I don't think, and like this fella had pressure on him since he was 18 years of age, since he was playing minor football. The pressure was coming with him all the way through, and he's just got better and better and better. And I just think pressure is actually what gets the best of this fella. I think if he's playing in a club game in a couple of weeks' time, I think he's going to find it hard to motivate himself to go out and But he's the kind of character, he just loves football so much, he'll do it anyway. But I just think this fella is made for the big stage. I just think that the bigger the occasion, the more this fella says, right, I'm just going to step up here and put on a show for you. And look, at the end of the day, the difference was if David Clifford was not playing for Kerry yesterday, we wouldn't have won that All-Ireland. And he single-handedly won All-Ireland for Kerry yesterday.
I keep like a couple of scores in the first half, Brian, when Kerry really needed a settler.
Absolutely.
And he was the one who he called. I was in the Davin, so I was in the upper Davin, and when the score was 3-0 or 2-0, exactly what Kerry hadn't scored, he called for the high ball coming. He was signaling to give it into me high. Just kick it in here. Doesn't matter how it comes in. Just kick it in here, and I'm going to win it. And there was no doubt that he was going to win it.
Absolutely. And what I like about it was the majority of his scores yesterday, barred the 2 frees. He won them himself. He won those 2 marks. Agreed. Those 2 marks were hard pass to win. Like, they weren't kind of a 40 little yard jet pass, and they had to go to the sky for those. And the ones he got from play were just fantastic as well. Do you know what I mean? They were, and even that free at the very end that he kicked, like that was a pressure kick, like as well, from the point of view, that angle as well. It's a hard kick down there, and Oisín would know from that angle down there, like. And in the hills where the wind is continuously swirling, like that wind is coming, just loops around the stadium and it come back the other way. And just to have the nerve to, and it was at a stage where Kerry needed to score, like they needed to score. And look, I just think the bigger the day, that this fella just seems to just walk 1 or 2 steps.
Our opposition, so lads, at a place now where you're not into planning to stop David Clifford, you're into limiting the damage that David Clifford can do, because now, okay, it doesn't really matter whether we, double team him, whether we +1 him, whether we just drop 10 men behind the ball, he's going to find a way. And, Paul, you said it right there. I mean, at the key junctures of the game yesterday, when Kerry were struggling early on, he kept him ticking over. B, when it was score for score in the second half, he was knocking scores over with his right foot, which is like supposedly his weaker foot at this stage. And these weren't tap overs either, by the way. And then finally, in the 67th minute, when the game is on the line, there's a delay. The referee pushes him back. He takes a step forward. The linesman pulls him back again, 3 meters towards the Cusack stand, and he knocks it over again. And at this stage, if you're Pádraig Joyce or you're Desi Farrell or you're anybody else at this stage, are you in a place now where you're saying, okay, don't give him a lot of frees and let's see if we can limit him to 3 or 4 points from play? That's basically almost where you're at. I mean, look at him yesterday. He scored, 8 or 9 points? Was it 2 marks, 3 frees, 3 play? It's kind of like the perfect hat-trick in soccer. It's kind of left foot, right foot header. He'll score any which way.
Probably will score a header at some point.
I just think at this stage he's at a point now. I think Oisín and Bryan know this better than certainly the two of us, Paul, in this call. That, I mean, I just can't conceive in my head how he would have actually kept himself zen in the Friday, Saturday, Sunday build up to that game, knowing that, like, when I say knowing that, I'm not being unfair to the rest of his colleagues, but certainly feeling that if Galway hold me today, if I don't produce today, there's more than an even chance that we are going to come up short. And that's precisely what happened.
Maybe that's
But
a good thing, though.
but
Maybe
I
it's a
think
good thing
I
to
think
think
he
that.
loves
Brings
that.
clarity.
But I think he loves that. I think this fella, this is what he feeds off.
Yeah.
I think Gooch was similar. You know, they were the kind of players that know that the result of this game rests on our shoulders. A lot of this output of this game is going to be based on how I perform. And I think these fellas love it. I think they want the pressure of it. And that's why I think they perform, because they just perform best when under pressure, as all great players do. In any world, so any sport you look at in the world, be it golf, tennis, rugby, the best players in the world, they perform under pressure because they love to do so under pressure. And they do it in the big
And
days.
I also think Tony, he probably did terrorize himself Friday and Saturday. You know, but he's not going to let us know about that. He's not going to let us see any of that. And you know, that's his playground. You know what I mean? That's the way he sees it. You know what I mean? And when you have that ability, I mean, there was a lovely moment yesterday. Sheehan Walsh had stepped inside and kicked off. Unbelievable point off his right foot. And the ball went straight up the top of the field, and Clifford kicked one. As much to say, well, hold on a second. You know, I know, you know, you're here as well. Like, but this is me. Like, you know, so it just was a lovely moment, I thought, because the two guys were just on a different planet yesterday, and Clifford wasn't letting them away with it, and it was just it was like a tennis match at one stage. Do you know what I mean? It really was between the two lads.
I wonder as well, lads, how I've seldom seen, especially in Kerry, but even with other managements, I've seldom seen a management name check a sports psychologist or a mental
Preparation
coach, mental prep. Thanks, Paul, a mental prep coach. Mentioned as often as Tony Griffin has by Kerry this year. I mean, Brian, you know that. I mean, you know, back in even your day and before it, like there was a few managers, and I think Jack might have been one of them in his first or second stint, tried to bring in a sports psychologist, and the likes of the Shays, I know, told him, listen, go away, I'm not into that stuff, get out of the room, you know. And so there's almost been a sense in Kerry over the years that that's a sign of mental weakness, that we have to rely on that crutch, and we don't want anybody knowing it. Whereas like Jack this year has been the one who's actually gone out and told people of the role of Tony Griffin. And I just saw a quote there from David Clifford, even talking about, he's been speaking to people about his prep for his freeze. And Brian, this will interest you in that he was basically saying, I tended to be a bit nonchalant with my free taking. I wasn't actually putting enough of an actual strategy in the 30 seconds. I wasn't getting myself in that zone again. And for me, Paul, I have to say, whether you're talking about David Clifford's freeze or Kerry generally, the one thing that has been so sorely absent, and you've heard me saying it, Paul, and you know, complaining about it, is that ability for Kerry to grind out the close games. When the shit hit the fan, did they have the ability to actually get the deal done? So many times in the recent past, it didn't happen. And Brian was involved in some of them. There were games I would talk about, the 2011 final, the 2013 semi-final, 2015 when they could have won, 2016, 2017 against Mayo. You know, even looking at like the 2019 final first game, Cork in 2020, Tyrone in 2021. Do I need to keep going? These things have been basically befuddling Kerry for over a decade. And the smallest thing this year was the biggest thing this year in terms of squeaking out those games where it's not, as Oisín says there, it's not a game of tennis. It's not something like an NBA game where you score, we score, we'll have a great game. It'll be like the Harlem Globetrotters at an all-star game. Kerry didn't bring their A game to Croke Park yesterday, and they got the deal done. And that, for me, is the biggest single takeaway from the 2022 season for Kerry football.
So I think this is a really key point. We've talked about Jack O'Connor and the experience that he's brought to this and how he's changed these things. You've rightly mentioned Tony Griffin, who is referenced all over the place, almost as much as Carolyn Curd is with Limerick in terms of these preparations. You've talked about the selectors, Dermot Murphy, his input, and Mike Quirk, and we've spoken as well about Paddy Tally's defensive system. But is it possible, or is it not more realistic that there's something else at play here, and that is that these players are simply a few years older, that they themselves have the experience to learn how to game out these matches, that Clifford has had those couple of years of honing these and understanding failure and coming out the other side of it, and that there's been work throughs from their point of view, and that those players themselves should actually be getting the great bulk of the credit here.
So, okay, I'll let the other lads answer that. But
Well, I just jump in on that. Sorry, just because it's funny. We had this conversation on Saturday night, just where I was with my uncle and my father, and again we went to Tony Griffin came up in conversation, and we spoke about how in my time there we had a sports psychologist, not full time, but probably came in the latter stages of the year. And I'm not like the O'Shea's, I know, said no. I think one of the O'Shea's says I can't even get to sort out my own head. How's he going to sort my head out for me? But I was kind of the same thing that yes, they can help us. I think an awful lot of this is down to experience. And there's a saying out there, and I'm unfortunately I fall into this category that a fool will learn from his own mistakes, a wise man will learn from others. And I find out the only way I'm going to learn is learning from my own mistakes. And sometimes when you go into games like that and you lose All Ireland finals and you lose those tight games, eventually it comes a time where you just have to learn, right, what did we do wrong? How can we keep losing here? And if I go back to this group of players, they've kind of been this group of players that started, I think after I finished up in 17, Peter started getting these group of players, and Jason Foley had come in my last year, Sean Shea had come in my last year, and all of a sudden Tom Sullivan was knocking on the place, and all of a sudden they started getting more integrated into the setup. And they lost in All Ireland, drew in All Ireland in 18, lost in All Ireland in 19, lost to Tyrone last year in the semi-final. And I think that has to stand for a lot. Because when you start going through and experiencing this, you have to start learning. Because if you don't start learning from those mistakes, something's not right. And I'm not trying to take away for 1 second the impact that Tony Griffin's had. I think it's massive because it's those tight games that he's instilled this kind of a mental toughness in him. But at the same time, I think an awful lot of it comes down to experience. And I'm just one of those people that I just seem to learn from mistakes. I learn from losing games, and how are we going to rectify it? If I find myself in that situation again, how would I play it out differently? And I think has an awful lot to play on it too. Just that was my point basically on the sports psychologist. I think it's a two-way thing. And the other thing is, how long these players have come.
I'm on that as well. I agree.
It's a combination. It's surely, lads, it's a combination.
It is.
Of all
It might only be 10% sports psychologist and 90% experience, but it's that extra 10% that's all you need to get you over the line.
Where do you sit on this, Oisín?
I remember encouraging the club to bring in a sports psychologist in 6 or 7. I remember the first thing he did was he come in and we were out in the pitch and he asked us all to link arms. And we had a couple of old school lads, 4 or 5 of them, and just went, nope, not happening. And I said, but we're only linking arms. They're too airy-fairy for me. And that was it. It was like, we were trying to talk about, that what we had was unbreakable. And there was 4 lads having a kick about, and the rest of us were in a circle. So sports psychology. We had a sports psychologist with us in 2 sports psychologists with us in 2002, and they changed a lot, around that squad and around the mindset.
What did they do?
Well, I tell you what they did. They started to work a lot with individuals. You know what I mean? So even just when you come down, Tony talks about the free taking. I noticed that about Clifford in 19. He missed a couple of frees against Cork that night in
2020.
2020. Sorry. And it was just like, I'll just kick this over the bar. Whereas now it's the same routine all the time. I know that sounds like a small thing, but like it's quite a big thing when you're taking free kicks. He's kicking now a 14-yard free the same way as he'll kick a 50-yard free, and that's the way. That has to be the mentality, and that has to be the way you go about it. But I do think that the hurt will help with the longevity, if that makes any sense whatsoever. Because I think there was a previous cohort of Kerry teams who come in and they took up the baton and they won another All Ireland, and then the next crew would win it, And I think that this famine of 8 years and how
Kind of make you sick with 8 years of the famine, isn't
they
it?
don't know they're living, do they?
They have no idea.
Oh,
They have no idea what hunger is.
No idea what it's like to live in the real world. But anyway, I just think that the hurt that they have experienced will make it easier to now go back and go again. And I honestly think that there's a real opportunity now for Kerry to double down. Not to think, we can win another All Ireland like this, but we can actually double down and we can actually, really, really express ourselves now. Foley's going to be, a year older, crucial player for them. Gavin White really coming into his own. Morley looks very comfortable in that position. So defensively, you still need to keep finding a bit. I think, but they're in a wonderful position, and they're in a wonderful position. As I say, and that is helped by the fact that there has been so much hurt. There has been so much criticism. There has been so many question marks from the likes of you, Paul, and now they've answered them. And now that there's an opportunity to, as I say, kick on maybe another step, and not like when they start again next year, the baggage is gone. Do you know what I mean? And that baggage, and especially, as I say, from their own, would have weighed very, very heavily. So got rid of a lot of that baggage yesterday.
But I hope, and I think, as you say, the baggage is gone, but I hope that they got a taste of success now. And I recall when I first came into setup, we got a taste of success, and we wanted more. And that was the big thing we wanted. We wanted more. It was so good. We loved everything about it. Just the whole team bonding from that, everything from the point of view that goes with winning an All Ireland. The celebrations, the bonding, the feel good factor. And I genuinely hope that this isn't a case of, we just won the All Ireland, baggage is off us now. I hope that they have a taste of success, and they say, hold on a second, we want more of this. You saw with Dublin, they got a taste of success and they just went after it every time. And I hope this group, they finally have a taste of success. They know what it is. And I really hope now that they knuckle down again next year and say, right, I want this again, and go after it.
I think, Brian, I will be stunned if Kerry do not come back next year. Absolutely ravenous to do this again. And Oisín, I think Oisín made a brilliant point yesterday, talking about Seanie O'Shea. So Seanie O'Shea yesterday did not have a stellar game going around the place. He didn't kick his long frees. From the minute he missed that first free from the throw-in, you kind of thought, okay, he's not quite, it's just slightly off it yesterday. But his work rate, his tackling, as Oisín pointed out yesterday, it shows you the fundamentals of the team that seem to be right. But I want to talk for a minute about Galway here, because with 4 or 5 minutes left in normal time yesterday, Galway were right in this match. And I think it's a contentious free that was given in front of the hill that time to put Kerry ahead. I do think Kerry were going to win at that point. I think they looked to have got a little bit of a hold on the game at that stage, but it was a contentious free, and Galway have come a huge way this year. Do you see Galway as the main contenders now in all of this, particularly if they can add to what Shane Walsh did yesterday? Because the rest of the forward line did not fire yesterday, but Shane Walsh was immense.
Do you want me to answer that,
Yeah,
Paul?
please, Tony.
I would agree with you about the free. I would say I'm not too sure too many refs would have given a free in right at that point. I mean, technically, you could make the argument that it was a free, that he did pull in Killian Spillane. I don't know how many would have given it. What wasn't mentioned yesterday, and this isn't doing a tit for tat on it, but I saw it because obviously I had a monitor in front of me in the press box. About 3 or 4 minutes beforehand, Killian McDade was bursting through from midfield, and he was met with 2 absolutely perfect shoulders, and he went down. It was absolutely not a free, and Galway scored from that. So, I mean, you could get into it. I think Pádraig Joyce was quite animated, and rightly so, because the scores were level at that moment. It was 16 points all. I think what you have to say about Galway is, and I met quite a few Galway people down around the dressing room area afterwards, and the general sense of it was, okay, now we know we are on the level. Now we know we can actually compete. And I think the point you made just there about it, which while everybody was talking last night and this morning about Shane Walsh's tour de force, what that also meant, by the way, was that Shane Walsh was keeping Galway in the game to a largest extent with his brilliance. Because even though Patrick Kelly did okay, Matthew Tierney was largely anonymous. Johnny Heaney didn't do a lot. He had a goal chance early on, didn't get it done. Damien Comer ended up out at midfield, actually winning ball, which says everything about what Jason Foley did with him. Rob Finnerty was taken off. Like there was a lot of players. I think Killian McDade certainly would have been, for me, apart from Shane Walsh, would have been man of the match.
Killian McDade was outstanding yesterday.
Outstanding if Galway had won the game. I think Liam Silk did well. I think Jack Lynn did very well. I think John Daly had an unbelievable first half. Absolutely. So the point is, while we're glowing in our praise of Kerry in terms of getting over the line, this was virgin territory for a huge number of the Galway players. And again, the two lads on the podcast here will know this better than me, that what that will do for them in terms of just their inner sense of worth, forget like belief or anything else, their inner sense of worth, that we went toe to toe with the All-Ireland champions. The one question you're left with, and it was said to me by a Galway man standing beside the team bus when they came out afterwards, you get these opportunities in life. You're level at 16 points all with 3 or 4 minutes to go. Did you leave a big one after you? Because from the 64th to the 76th minute, that's 12 minutes of football, Galway didn't raise a flag. And there will, of course, there's massive pride and there's massive hope for the future. But when you get there and you're in that thing, when, as Jack would say, when the fat was in the fire with a couple of minutes to go, was that the difference ultimately, that they hadn't been there before? And how much will they take from that? So they're not thinking right this morning, Paul, oh, the future is great for us in 2023. But I'd say certainly in terms of, if we were to do the 1, 2, 3, 4 for next year, that's an interesting conversation. If we were to do our power rankings right now, Oisín, for the end of the year, looking ahead, you'd be saying, given the fact that they were both in the final, you'd be saying Kerry 1, you'd be saying Galway 2. After that, are you looking at maybe Dublin, Armagh, Derry, in that order? Oisín, what do you think?
To be honest, because of yesterday, I'll probably go out of Galway maybe a 3. If you're looking into the future, obviously, if you're looking into the future, and the reason for that is that Galway will realize now they need to find a few. They need to find 4 or 5. And obviously Mike Cairns will hopefully come back in for them, so that will add to them. But Dublin with possibly a new regime, and possibly with probably with Conor Callan back and maybe 1 or 2 more, and the way they played in the second half against Kerry, so we'll probably go Kerry, Dublin, Galway, and then there's a multitude of teams just in a wee cluster, I think. Like I would even throw the likes of Mayo, Armagh, Derry, Donegal, Tyrone. Who am I missing? What's the obvious ones I'm missing?
Kildare
maybe,
Kildare maybe just below that.
So I'd say there's a cluster then,
And there are a lot of managerial appointments going to be made in the next month, and they are fundamental to how next season works. And I went through this morning, I read it's amazing the way a game finishes and you already start casting forward to next year and wondering, because I think there is this sense, and it was repeatedly said about Kerry, if they win one, that it could open the gates here to this as a young team, and that they will put them one after the next. So I looked at the structure for next year's championship, and there are PhD theses which are less convoluted than some of the decisions being made in next year's championship. So we're going to what will inevitably be called a round robin, or inevitably be called a Champions League style competition after the provincial championships, which basically means a round robin. After that, 16 teams. So we're going to have 90 championship matches next year in a tight window, which is the same size, up from mid 60s this year. The Ulster Championship is going to be played off in 5 weeks. So that's going to be like, there's going to be stretcher bearers bringing the team down to Dublin. By the time they reach the All-Ireland knockout stages, it's going to get really, really interesting to see how a team can manage its way to a provincial final, which gets you through to these round robin stages, and then how you get through that All-Ireland Championship in a way that you reach a quarter-final stage where you're set up to take off. And that is not going to be straightforward for teams with small panels. I think that's the huge benefit for Kerry is that they've blooded a lot of players over the last number of years. And Tony, this is where, well, that's a long way of asking what is basically a very short question. We've spoken about a lot of people getting credit for what Kerry have done. What credit does Peter Keane get for Kerry winning this All-Ireland?
I don't think, what credit does Peter Keane get for winning this All-Ireland? I mean, obviously, Kerry were very near it. Like when you know, some people talk about lucky generals. I think there would be a view that Peter Keane was an unlucky general. You know, I don't think, you know, I suppose you could pick holes in anyone, Paul. The 2019 final, I firmly believe Kerry should have won that game in the first day. They turned the ball over 4 times when they were a point ahead at key moments in the last 5 or 6 minutes. Is that Peter Keane's fault? No, it's absolutely not. You know, certainly he has to share some of the blame. Or sorry, we keep saying this. We keep thinking that it's just down to the manager. I mean, you know, if there's a selection group, they all have an input. 2020, I think the team was set up badly against Cork, but I still think that they were unbelievably unlucky. They just got absolutely suckered in the last minute. And 2021, you know, you see, this depends which side of the coin you want to look at it from. You can say they were very unlucky because David Clifford wasn't on in extra time, and if he was on in extra time, they'd got over the line. The bottom line is they conceded 3 goals in that semi-final. Kerry didn't concede, sorry, they did actually in the end. They conceded 3 goals in the entire season this year, between 2 in the league and 1 in the championship. So, you know, I think Peter Keane was an unlucky general. I think if things had fallen other ways, he might have actually ended up breaking that cycle, the famine that Oisín likes to reference there. It was only 7 years last year. But I do think there are subtle but crucial differences to the setup this year. I mean, if you were actually talking about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of how Kerry won the All-Ireland this year, they're all small increments, Paul, but they're all crucial increments. You know, the emergence, by the way, of Graham O'Sullivan. We haven't even mentioned Graham O'Sullivan yet. Like, Graham O'Sullivan has been knocking around the Kerry setup for quite a few years. What's he? He's Brian. You remember him. He was a stellar minor, really good under 20. I thought to myself, you know, he'll burst straight onto the scene. It's really only been this year. And remember, we discussed it after the Dublin game, that how Paddy Clifford stepped up in that crucial moment. Well, Graham O'Sullivan was that player.
Yeah.
Graham O'Sullivan was the guy, like Brian O'Begliac in the last few minutes against Dublin when he had to make the hard runs for Shane Ryan's kick-out. Like when it was a question of overlap, when it was a question of getting on ball, and when it was a question of having the balls to take on a shot at a crucial moment in the game, Graham O'Sullivan was making his debut in an All-Ireland final yesterday. I mean, in fairness to the guy, he was outstanding. You've got to remember, you're talking about next year, Paul. There's a lad called Stephen McConville from the Gale who was over in Australia. He's back now. He's had a brutally unlucky season with injuries. Like, he is another defender. He is a fullback. He could play centre-back. He could play midfield for Kerry. He's a serious athlete. You've got to remember, Tony Brosnan hardly got a look in the latter stages this year. So in terms of where it is next year, I think Kerry won an All-Ireland when all the dices were loaded against them in terms of the sequencing of a season. I do think certainly in terms of frequency of games, and Eamon Fitzmaurice always said that, if you can go game to game, week on week, or better on week on fortnight, like the teams that go down to number 28, 29, 30 are going to have a huge advantage. I don't buy, by the way, Paul, what you're saying. I think it's too facile to say, and I'm not saying you're just the one saying it, because everybody seems to be saying, oh, that's it, the handbrake is off. No, Kerry.
Oh yeah, I know. I don't. I'm only referencing what other people are saying.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't work like
not
that.
that simple.
There's an incredible appetite. There's an incredible number of things, small increments, as I call them, that went for Kerry this year that they got right. There's no guarantee, by the way, that they get those things right again next year. They mightn't get those things right next year. So, I mean, I think who said it last night? Was it somebody said it last night after 2014? There's a lot of people in Kerry thought to ourselves, we're back now. 8 years later, they were still waiting. Yeah. Was it Gooch? Yeah, one of the lads said that. I mean, so there's no guarantee. You take what you could get. And I have to admit, I suppose it's my hang up about them not getting across the line previously. When Galway went 14-12 ahead yesterday, I genuinely thought to myself, I think Galway are going to actually get this done. I really do. But what I didn't take into account, lads, is I didn't take into account that extra percentage point, 2, 3 or 4, and whatever the reason for it is, Brian, of Kerry basically being able to grind out a result in awkward circumstances this year. That for me is the fundamental difference. So
I think there's one other difference. I think there's one point that we have to talk about here. I watched the match late last night again, and this is a rough statting of it, but more or less from kickouts, from their own kickout, the teams were level. So I think Galway maybe got 10, depending on which way you read it, 10 or 11 scores from their own kickout, which they ended up scoring from point of origin of attack, and Kerry were one less than that. Both teams scored 2 points from taking the ball off the opposition's kickout. Galway got 1 point, which came directly from the throw-in. But the key difference in the match was, from what I can see, Galway got 2 points more or less from turning over ball that Kerry had. But Kerry got 7 or 8 points from turning 8 points, from turning over ball that Galway have. So I think the point of those turnovers were twofold. Number one, Kerry's tackling is way up this year on what it has been previously. I think they're strong enough and physical enough and get enough people there in a structured way to turn over the ball. And also, Galway were loose at key stages yesterday and gave really sloppy passes based around poor decisions at crucial moments, which gave Kerry an out of the game. Well, if Galway had been able to squeeze the nut a little bit tighter, just tighten things a little bit more, I think Kerry would have become even more challenging for Kerry yesterday. Oisín.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think the turnover stat was the one that I looked at. It was 8-2, and the as you say, the improvement in the level of the tackling, from a Kerry point of view, the way they're able to turn the ball over and how quickly then they can transition it is hugely impressive. And it's part of that is a change. That's a dramatic change from what has gone on beforehand. So that's down to management, coaches, backroom team. That's a clearly defined thing that Kerry wanted to do. Kerry want to be seen as being tougher, stronger, more difficult to break down, and that's the stat you look at when you look at a team and how hard they're working.
Brian, so we're now at we're recording this on Monday morning. It's 10:15 on Monday morning. What's happening now with the Kerry players?
100%, yeah. There's probably a few stragglers pick themselves and probably down the dart already, I'd imagine. I think, in fairness, that I don't know what the story now at the moment is with COVID and restrictions and things, but they asked to carry the cup to Crumlin. So again, I don't know.
To the children's hospital.
The children's hospital, yeah. So again, I'm not sure if that's something that's happening at the moment due to restrictions, but it was always the ritual, I think, of the All-Ireland winners was to do that. So whatever couple of fellas you could gather around the place that were acceptable to go, and they went. But no, look, as it says, we spoke last week about the difference between losing, what it's like losing from the point of view of wake up Monday morning and
What does that feel like? What does it feel like to wake up a winner?
you bounce 3 bounce of the bed. You jump up. It's just complete opposite. It's just the best feeling in the world. It's just you're jumping out of the bed. You're jumping into the shower. You're suit on again, ready to go. It's just everything is a buzz.
Who did you room with?
No, it varied. I roomed with Donegal Walsh for a small bit. For some reason, my roommates kept changing around every so often. But I had a good spell with Donny for a small bit. I was at Donegal Walsh for a good bit. So
Was that their doing?
Yeah,
it must be it. So it varied. But probably the latter stage of the year was killing a good bit. But no, the nights at the All Ireland, you're with your partner, so the nights at the game. So, but it was a case of just get out of bed and get out and enjoy the celebrations, and everything was just easy. You just went with the flow. It was easy to do. It was just all they're doing is just celebrating. That's it, really. Just enjoying having a crack. There's very little talk about football, to be honest with you. I think the game is over and done with. Whereas the opposite is going on in Galway. They're dissecting the game, fellas questioning this, questioning that. So it's completely two different camps, completely two different feelings, and without a doubt, the best place to be at the moment is in the Kerry camp.
And in terms of what it does for you as a footballer, and how you carry yourself over the coming months and into next year, what does it do for you?
Well, in fairness, I think it's, as we spoke about last week, how you come off back of losing, you're straight into club football. Like the intermediate is starting next weekend with the clubs here, so they're going to be going straight back into club football. So whatever way they look about it, they'll enjoy this week, and they'll enjoy it as much as they can for as long as they can, and they'll go straight back into club football. And these fellas, they'll be knocking lumps out of each other the week after next, and that's it. And you get on with it, and that's what you do. I kind of feel sorry from the point of view with the way the structure is for the county players, because let's be honest, I don't think they'll have much of an off season. Whatever happens here from the point of view, I know it's a split season. It is for the club player, but it's not for the county players, because at the end of the day, they're going to have a club championship, they're going to have a county championship, they'll have a local district championship down here, and they're expected to go back into McCarry in training in November, December. So I feel sorry for these fellas, and I worry about fellas that have injuries. They know that would be carrying knocks throughout the year. Are they going to get the time off to rehab them? I think that was probably one of the things I found very, very hard in the mid-noughties in particular. I think we were coming off the back of winning All-Irelands, or involved in All-Irelands. We then were very successful in the county championship with South Kerry. At that time, we'd have a fantastic group. I think we went to 4 county championship finals. That wasn't finished until October, at best. If you went to a county final, probably November. Sorry, because the All-Ireland played in September. And then you're straight into a local championship at home here, which was usually finished off on possibly Stephen's Day or Christmas Eve, depending. And you're straight back into Kerry then in January, facing into the league. So it's going to be difficult for some fellas. But again, look, they're going to be on a high. They'll be on a high. And
yeah, it's that thing of being on a high though as well. Oisín, what did it do for your sense of self winning an All Ireland?
It's probably a lot different, coming from Armagh than it is from Kerry. I mean, like, people lost their minds, and for weeks and months, and I remember we had club championship 2 weeks later, so like the first week after is complete blur. The cup had to go everywhere. Even though we had it for a year, it had to go to everywhere, within that first week, and it's busy. And you sort of you sense, you almost get to the, you run on adrenaline until the following maybe Saturday or Sunday, and then you just fall to pieces. It's like, it's a big downer, and then you go back to club training and you start to get yourself going again and start getting yourself up again. But what did it do for self? It changed things. It changed things dramatically as far as I just think the way people view you, and I know it's only winning a football match, but the way people view you and the way people talk to you, and the things that once seemed quite difficult, whether it be membership of a golf club or entry into a nightclub or whatever it is just seemed a lot easier all of a sudden, and just how you deal with that then. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it give you an enormous sense of self-worth, and also even just when you played, you just felt, you know, a couple of feet taller. And I always loved having a target on my back personally, as in, you know, people, you know, coming to mark you, you know, coming to try and blot you out of the game. And obviously that was the case then. It goes to a different level, you know, and the intensity, the abuse, all of those things, and that I particularly like that as a player. And I think, you know, again, it's a strange one because you're after doing something with a crowd of boys and there's a crowd of lads, and you're so close, and you've got, you know, one of the things that they will find, I think, one of the things that the players will find is that, you know, for all the team bonding you do, for all the time you spend together, this week is crucial. And the reason why it's crucial is because this is an opportunity to enjoy each other's company. There's no pressure on. You know, you can just go, you can enjoy it, you can do things that, you know, you're not able to do you know, during the season. So, you know, just go enjoy each other's company, and that obviously that stands to you in a big way. But again, club championship starts, and you know, the chances are your opposition, or the man who's marking you, is somebody who you're after winning All Ireland with, and you know, just completely forgotten in the space of, you know.
Out you go. Before we finish up here, I want to do a couple of things very quickly. Tony, I'm going to go through them with you first. Now, you proposed Thomas Sullivan for Footballer of the Year last week. I'm not sure that can survive his experience in the All-Ireland final. However, who do you now say is Footballer of the Year?
Well, I'm going to be completely unpredictable here and say David Clifford.
David Clifford, Young Footballer of the Year.
Oh, Young Footballer of the Year. Who did I text you, Paul? You actually asked me that. And Young Footballer of the Year, I think up to the semi-final, Lee Gannon.
Yeah.
I think Lee Gannon had a really, really good year. I think Jack Leen had a really good year.
Richard.
Yeah, I really think he did. And I'm looking through the Kerry lads yesterday. Does Graham O'Sullivan qualify now as a contender?
See, we're massaging the rules here, so we're almost looking at it in terms of newcomer of the year rather than the age of the person. Well, so to me that would suggest that you can go with Graham O'Sullivan. I think Jacqueline is a great shout, by the way, as well. Yeah. Should we all agree on David Clifford is going to be Footballer of the Year? Is that more or less it?
Yeah. Good enough for
Very
me.
hard to get right. Manager of the Year, Tony.
I'm sorry again, but I mean, I've had many a row, Paul, and you've had many, even in your short relationship with him, with Jack O'Connor. You know, he wasn't known as Cranky Jack for a reason, but like, I have to tip my hat to what he has done this year. I just think he has got so many big calls right, and I come back to what I say earlier. If there's one life lesson out of this, is the more experience you have, the better your judgment. And I thought his judgment this year was spot on. I'm sorry for being predictable, because you like to go with a manager who, like a Jack Cooney or like somebody like that.
You could talk about Jack Cooney, or you could talk about Billy Lee, both of you talk about Rory Gallagher's brilliant job. And I think Pádraig Joyce and his management team in Galway have done an outstanding job this year to improve a team repeatedly. I was really interesting thing that happened for people who weren't at the game, or they might not have seen this. The fact that Galway had 40 players togged out yesterday, loads of whom went in for the initial photograph and then headed to the stand in their full gear afterwards. That's a huge panel that's there. It's going to be really interesting to see who emerges from there. Lads, are you going with Jack O'Connor as Manager of the Year?
Yeah, I go Jack O'Connor, and obviously a doffing of the cap to you for, you know, getting him into the position.
And absolutely. This nonsense has to stop. We need to stop this now.
You got to mention in the match program, even Roser yesterday. That'll tell you the stellar name that you are now.
I want,
Indiana.
yeah. This really isn't helpful. This really isn't helpful, and I want to be absolutely clear. I want to be in no way associated with Kerry ever winning any All Ireland. The game of the year.
Are
Tony,
you asking me again?
yeah, I am. Yeah.
The game of the year. Oh, that's a massive toss-up for absolute end-to-end excitement. I'm going Galway Armagh, but I did think that the Kerry Dublin game for large stages was a throwback to the great heavyweight clashes between them of, heavyweight against heavyweight, blow for blow, punch for punch. But just in terms of just the insanity of the whole thing, I think Galway Armagh.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I find it very hard to argue with that. To be honest, I suppose you could say for the quality of football, if you're being nitpicking, you're going to say the quality of football was played between Kerry and Dublin was at the top level, but for pure entertainment and madness, you probably have to say the Armagh Galway game.
Yeah. Oisín.
Armagh Galway, but I yearned for another 20 minutes of Dublin Kerry. I wouldn't never want a gay to miss a free kick in that situation. I would never, but I wanted more. There was just so much in that Dublin Kerry game. Just
only neutrals, I think, or Dublin people wanted
Yeah.
that. Kerry,
Yeah.
I did not want that game.
Would have easily took another 20 minutes of that.
I'd have feared for Kerry if that went to extra time.
Yeah.
I will say that you might get your extra time in that game, and it could be the final of the 2023 All Ireland Championship, which brings me to my last question to you, Tony, the winner of the 2023 All Ireland.
Oh God. The winner of the 2023. I'll tell you what. No, you're going to say that's going to be Kerry and everything like that. I think Kerry have a nice bit of business to do between the start of next year, and I know Oisín and Paul are going to throw their eyes up to heaven here, Brian, when they hear us saying this.
Go on, there. We can't wait to hear how Kerry dropped to number 6 in the power ratings.
No. Patrick O'Sullivan
in the
and
course
his
of the next 4
executive.
minutes.
Patrick O'Sullivan and his executive have some important bits of business to take care of. I think that there's going to be a new Kerry minor management in play. I think there is definitely going to be a new Kerry under 20 management in play. If Jack O'Connor was to walk away tomorrow morning and say, lads, I've done it again. I've come back for a third time. I've won my 4th All Ireland. I'm 61, but you know what? I'm done. Who's the next Kerry manager, Brian?
That's the big question.
It is.
It is, and look, that's the thing about it.
How are you even having this conversation? There is no way Jack O'Connor is going to walk out.
No way. Listen, all I'm asking is it's succession planning. Kerry have got to now say, we're not waiting another 8 years for another All Ireland. We need to get our ducks in a row. They are lucky.
Ducks are in a row. Why are you talking about that? Jack O'Connor? Jack O'Connor is looking here at 2 in a row and then 3 in a row.
Yeah, Kerry.
Paul, be careful. Be careful. They're avoiding the question. Be careful.
Kerry are lucky.
It's brilliantly done. Obfuscation. Fantastic. Tony, it was a simple question. Who is going to win the 2023 All Ireland? One word answer, please. Is the line gone?
I'm refusing to answer that. Dublin or Kerry? Dublin or Kerry?
How do you answer it? You say who you think is going to win it.
You're asking me the morning after the
20th. The morning after the All Ireland.
I'll ask Oisín, as he describes himself as the senior analyst.
Man, yous are contrary. I hope I'm not that contrary when I get to your age. Kerry.
Brian, one last go at it.
It's the morning after, there's so much factors come to play. What's the story with Dublin? Are Dublin going to stick with the same management? If they don't, are like Paul Mannion, Jack McCaffrey going to step back into the fray again? Do you know what I mean?
No.
Condor. There's so many questions. You've a new setup with the league or the championship next year for this round robin series. It all depends on players. Is David Clifford got a knock, or if he got injured, or it's going to come down to squads. Jesus, that's it. It's a question that's. But look, for the sake of it, just for the sake of it, we're after winning the All Ireland this year. I will just say Kerry will win it next year. And that's only just throwing out a comment just for the sake of it, to be honest.
Yeah, no, but I
just
no,
answer a question.
But of course, it's a speculative thing. But if you were to be in charge of any team in the coming year at this particular point, it would have to be Kerry, looking at the
Yeah,
balance of players
that's
that
a
they have
different
at their
question.
disposal.
But sure, they're all Ireland champions, of course it is.
Exactly.
Who would like them in
So,
hurling? All
look,
different.
as a starting point, yeah, as a starting point, I think that's the starting point. It's really interesting what's happening in Dublin and the stories that are around Dublin this weekend, and the sense that Dessie Farrell is about to go, and the names being bandied about of people who are going to take over Dublin again. So, for example, there's WhatsApps flying around the city and people whispers going that Pat Gilroy might be back, or that Declan Darcy, the great coach under Jim Gavin, is going to come back as manager with Mick Bohan involved in him. There's talk that Stephen Cluxton is going to be part of the management team, and then there's another WhatsApp going round which says that Paul Mannion has agreed to come back into the panel at this stage. It's actual madness. I was there yesterday evening. The talk is that who's going to take over Monaghan, who's going to take over Donegal, will Anthony Cunningham still be there in Roscommon? All of these things are in churn, whereas Kerry now have stability, and that must give you a great starting point.
Yeah, but outside of Dublin, there, I still think those teams you mentioned, Monaghan, Mayo, Donegal, I think they're still well off the pace of it. I don't think, to be honest, whatever manager comes in there, I still don't think they're at the pace of the top 3 or 4 teams that are going to contend for the All-Ireland. Look, Kerry are in a great place. Yeah, they are. Look, sure, they're Ireland champions. Of course, we're in a great place. Do you know what I mean? The only thing, big powerhouse that's out there is Dublin, to see what they are going to pull together for next year. Because at the end of the day, Dublin could have been a Dublin Galway Ireland final had Con been playing. Do you know what I mean? So, like, Dublin are going nowhere. And if anything, we'll see they might possibly get stronger for next year. So, look, I think the other management appointments, it's a big call for those counties. It's a big call to see where they're going to go from here. And I look, for example, Donegal. They've always been branded around the place from being that they're contenders for this, but they've time and time again they've just failed. They just haven't turned up on the big day when they've had to. Who's going to step in there and do that? Mayo, again, another team that just look, we've spoken enough about them from their failings. Is a new manager going to come in and change that? Because I think that's the big thing. He's going to have to try and find forwards. They're going to have to come up with something to stop the same rot happening over and over again, of the same mistakes being made, decision making. So, but again, I think they're well off the pace of where you're going to talk about All-Ireland contenders for next year. But
And one other question, Brian, again, and it's a serious question that Oisín might be able to answer. Paddy Tally, I think I'm right in saying, was on a career break this year. Is Paddy Tally going to be on a career break next year? Has he signed up to be with Kerry again in 2023? That's an important issue too.
Yeah, it's gathering people around you rather than losing them at this point is where you think things are to be going. We're going to have a special show in the coming weeks to discuss the Sunday game team of the year. We don't have time to go into it today, and we're going to try and pick our all-star team in the coming weeks. I want to finish before we go by congratulating Kerry footballers, Kerry management, well done to Kerry players in general, and to note as well, yesterday before the game in Croke Park, there was a condolences passed to Kevin Behan, the great former Louth footballer, and anybody who has been in and around the Boar's Head will know how well his great friend Hugh Hurricane had a friendship with Kevin Behan, and how Kevin was an unbelievable character. For those who didn't know him, he's from Louth. He played in the 57 All-Ireland final, was one of the key winners in that team. He'd previously actually gone to school in St. Pat's in Armagh, Oisín, and he lived a life out in Dublin, lived in Phibsborough, a great character in the area of Phibsborough. And as recently as last Friday evening, 2 nights ago in hospital, he was sitting up in bed drinking a bottle of Heineken, which had been smuggled into him. And it's there's no good way to go, but if there is such a thing, it is not too bad. So absolute condolences to his family and to his friends. Thank you to Larry Ryan for running this podcast, to Raf Rocca, to Jack Neville, to everyone at Examiner Sport. Thanks to Renault for their support over the weeks. A huge thanks to Oisín McConville, to Bryan Sheehan, to Tony Leen for joining us today. Beimich Harnash Galua.
Thanks to our sponsors, Renault. The Renault Capture, the versatile compact family SUV.
You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I
There's a small bit of a needle there.
Come on, Mayo, you've got to get Andy Moran into the game.
Listen back to Eden.